Hey everybody, look, the janitor's kid brought a science project. The laughter exploded across Brighton Academy's auditorium before Noah Brooks could even reach the stage steps. Phones lifted instantly. Screens glowed in the dim light like tiny spotlights aimed straight at him. Someone near the back whistled. Another student muttered loud enough for half the room to hear, maybe his dad helped him build it between toilet cleanings. More laughter. Noah tightened his grip around the black plastic case pressed against his chest. The edges dug into his fingers, but he didn't loosen them. Not even a little. Above him, giant silver banners hung from the ceiling celebrating Brighton's legacy of excellence. National champions. Ivy League acceptances. Future leaders of America. Under the bright auditorium lights, the polished marble floors reflected rows of expensive shoes, tailored blazers, gold watches gifted by proud parents. Noah stood alone in worn gray sneakers with rainwater still darkening the hems of his jeans. Principal Whitmore adjusted the microphone near center stage and forced a strained smile toward the crowd. Settle down, everyone. But the grin twitching at the corners of his mouth betrayed him. He wasn't stopping the humiliation. He was enjoying it. Near the front row, Ethan Calloway leaned back comfortably in his seat, one arm draped over the chair beside him. Confident. Relaxed. Untouchable. His father's company funded half the school's new technology wing, and everyone knew it. Ethan slowly clapped twice. Come on, Noah, he called out smoothly. We're all dying to see what genius looks like from the janitor's closet. The auditorium erupted again. Noah felt heat rise into his neck, but his face stayed still. That was something his father had taught him years ago. Never let people see what their cruelty costs you. The projector lights hummed overhead. Somewhere backstage, a metal cart rattled against a wall. Noah's eyes drifted briefly toward the side entrance near the curtains. His father stood there in his Navy maintenance uniform, one hand still wrapped around the handle of a mop bucket. Daniel Brooks had probably been cleaning the east hallway when the noise started. Now he just stood frozen beside the doorway, shoulders tense beneath fluorescent lighting that made the silver streaks in his beard look even sharper. Their eyes met for only a second. Daniel gave the smallest nod imaginable. Not fear. Not pity. Faith. Noah swallowed hard and stepped toward the stage anyway. The science case trembled once in his hands before becoming still again. Principal Whitmore sighed into the microphone. Noah Brooks was not originally selected as a finalist for today's showcase, but apparently he insisted his project deserved consideration. A few students snickered. Noah carefully placed the black case onto the presentation table. The latches clicked open louder than expected in the silence. Inside sat a compact filtration device built from recycled circuit boards, copper tubing, and a battered control panel scratched from years of use. It didn't look polished like the glossy inventions displayed around the auditorium. It looked used. Real. Built by hands that understood struggle. Ethan stared at it for a moment before smirking again. What is that thing supposed to do? Noah finally spoke, his voice calm despite the pressure crushing his chest. Clean contaminated water. More laughter rolled through the room. Someone shouted, maybe start with the school toilets first. Even Principal Whitmore chuckled quietly at that one. But Noah didn't react. He only reached into the case and adjusted one small dial near the center of the machine. A faint blue light flickered alive beneath the scratched plastic cover. The auditorium slowly quieted. Noah looked out across hundreds of faces waiting for him to fail. Then he lifted his chin slightly and said, "This machine can purify enough drinking water for an entire small town using less electricity than a microwave." The silence that followed felt different this time. Smaller. Tighter. Dangerous. The silence inside Brighton Academy's auditorium lasted barely 3 seconds before the whispers started creeping back in. They moved across the room like wind slipping under a locked door. Some students leaned toward each other with raised eyebrows while others glanced down at their phones, already searching for reasons to laugh again. Noah stood motionless beside the filtration device as the faint blue light continued glowing beneath the scratched casing. Principal Whitmore cleared his throat into the microphone and forced another smile, though this one looked thinner than before. "Well," he said carefully, "that is certainly an ambitious claim." Ethan Calloway tilted his head slightly, studying the machine with narrowed eyes now instead of amusement. "You built that by yourself?" he asked. Noah nodded once. "Mostly." Ethan smirked faintly. "Mostly?" Before Noah could answer, movement near the side curtains drew attention across the auditorium. Daniel Brooks quietly stepped backward with his mop bucket as if trying to disappear again. His maintenance badge swung softly against his uniform with each movement. A few students turned toward him immediately. One girl near the front wrinkled her nose and whispered something that made her friends laugh under their breath. Daniel lowered his eyes and continued toward the exit without saying a word. Noah noticed anyway. He always noticed. Ever since he was little, he had learned how to recognize the exact moment people stopped seeing his father as a human being and started seeing him as part of the furniture. The same way people ignored trash cans or hallway clocks. Useful when needed. Invisible when not. Ethan leaned back again in his chair. "So let me guess," he said loudly. "Your dad found those parts in the school dumpsters?" More laughter rolled through the room, but weaker this time. Noah looked down at the machine instead of reacting. The copper tubing near the base still carried small scratches from where Daniel had spent hours polishing it with steel wool at their apartment kitchen table. Some of the circuit boards had come from broken computers discarded during Brighton's annual technology upgrade. Daniel had dragged them home one piece at a time in old grocery bags after midnight shifts. Their apartment still smelled faintly of solder smoke and industrial cleaner because of it. Noah remembered nights when the radiator barely worked during December cold snaps, yet his father still sat beside him under a buzzing ceiling light holding flashlight steady while Noah rewired damaged components. Daniel never understood the equations completely, but he understood effort. He understood sacrifice. And he understood what happened to gifted kids without money in America. "It works," Noah said quietly. Ethan spread his arms dramatically. "Then prove it." The crowd immediately stirred with excitement again. Phones rose higher. Someone near the back shouted, "Yeah, let us see the magic water trick." Principal Whitmore hesitated. "This is only a preliminary student showcase," he interrupted. "The official judging committee has not reviewed these projects yet." "Why not?" Ethan asked smoothly without taking his eyes off Noah. "Unless the school is scared the janitor's kid might embarrass the honor students." A few uncomfortable laughs followed that one. Whitmore's jaw tightened slightly. He hated losing control of a room. Noah reached beneath the table and lifted a clear plastic container filled with cloudy brown water. Tiny bits of dirt floated near the surface beneath the bright auditorium lights. Several students recoiled immediately. "That came from the drainage ditch behind the football field this morning," Noah explained. Ethan laughed once. "Perfect. Straight from your natural habitat." This time the laughter barely lasted at all. Noah connected the container to the machine with steady hands. The blue light brightened softly. A low mechanical hum spread through the auditorium. Then slowly, almost impossibly, clear water began flowing through the second tube into an empty glass cylinder beside the machine. The room fell silent again. Completely silent. Even Ethan stopped smiling. The first sound came from the judge's table near the front row. A quiet clink of glass as one of the chemistry professors slowly lifted the cylinder closer to the light. The water inside was clear. Not almost clear. Completely clear. Bright auditorium lights passed through it without revealing even a trace of sediment. The professor blinked twice before lowering the glass carefully onto the table. Around him, whispers spread again, but this time they sounded different. Uneasy. Curious. Principal Whitmore stepped closer to the machine with visible hesitation. "That is impossible," he muttered under his breath, though the microphone clipped enough of the sentence for nearby students to hear it. Noah adjusted another dial on the side panel. "It uses a 3-stage filtration system," he explained calmly. "Carbon mesh, ultraviolet purification, and low-voltage ion separation." Ethan crossed his arms tightly now. "You memorized that from the internet?" Noah looked at him directly for the first time all afternoon. "No. I built it." The words landed harder than shouting would have. Several students exchanged glances. Near the side exit, Daniel had stopped walking completely. He stood motionless beside the mop bucket with one tired hand resting against the handle. His back ached badly today. Noah could tell by the way his father kept shifting weight off his left side. But Daniel stayed anyway. He stayed because for once, people were finally looking at his son instead of through him. Principal Whitmore forced a small laugh into the microphone. "Well, Brighton Academy certainly encourages initiative." Ethan immediately stood from his seat. Then let him explain how a scholarship kid suddenly builds technology that looks military grade. The room stiffened again. Noah remained still beside the table. Ethan stepped closer slowly, polished dress shoes tapping sharply against the marble floor. "You expect everyone here to believe you did this alone in some tiny apartment?" His voice carried easily through the silent auditorium. "Come on, Noah. We both know kids like us have access to resources people like you do not." Noah's jaw tightened slightly. "People like you." There it was again. Always hidden beneath polished smiles and expensive vocabulary. The invisible line Brighton Academy pretended did not exist. Ethan stopped only a few feet from the stage now. "My father spent $200,000 funding this science department," he continued. "Some of us have worked our whole lives for these opportunities." Noah almost laughed at that. Worked their whole lives. Ethan had probably never seen his father clean dried gum from cafeteria floors at 1 in the morning. Never watched him soak swollen hands in cold water after double shifts. Never heard him quietly groan while climbing apartment stairs because medical bills cost more than rest. Noah glanced briefly toward Daniel again. His father quickly looked away, embarrassed by the attention already settling across the room. That hurt more than the insults. Daniel Brooks had spent years making himself smaller so people would feel comfortable standing taller. Noah hated that. "My father worked for every opportunity one ever had," Noah said quietly. Ethan smirked faintly. "By pushing a mop?" The silence afterward felt heavier than before. One student near the back shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Another slowly lowered her phone. Daniel's hand tightened around the mop handle, but his expression never changed. That was the thing about men like Daniel Brooks. Life had taught them how to survive humiliation quietly. Principal Whitmore finally stepped between them with an uneasy smile. "All right, gentlemen, let us maintain professionalism." But Ethan was not finished. "You know what I think," he said loudly. "I think somebody helped him. Somebody smarter." Noah stared at him calmly. "You mean somebody richer?" A few students inhaled sharply. Ethan's smile disappeared completely. The projector lights buzzed softly overhead while rain tapped against the high auditorium windows. Outside, dark storm clouds had swallowed most of the afternoon sun, leaving the room colder than before. Then suddenly one of the judges stood up from the front table holding Noah's printed research packet in both hands. His expression had changed entirely. No amusement. No skepticism. Just shock. "Who taught you advanced environmental engineering at this level?" he asked slowly. Noah hesitated for only a second. Then he answered honestly. "Nobody." The question hung over the auditorium like thunder waiting to break. Nobody moved. Even the students recording on their phones seemed unsure whether to keep filming or lower their cameras completely. The elderly judge near the front table adjusted his glasses slowly, still staring at Noah's research packet as though he had discovered something impossible hidden between the pages. Nobody, he repeated carefully. Noah nodded once. I borrowed library textbooks online and watched college lectures after school. Ethan laughed again, but the sound came thinner now. Forced. That is cute, he said. You expect everyone to believe you taught yourself advanced engineering from free videos? Noah looked directly at him. You would be surprised what people learn when they cannot afford teachers. Several students shifted uncomfortably. Principal Whitmore stepped forward quickly before the silence could deepen further. All right, he announced, clapping his hands once. This demonstration has certainly been memorable. He smiled tightly toward the judges' panel. Perhaps we should continue with the scheduled finalists. But the elderly judge did not sit down. Instead, he walked slowly toward Noah's machine, careful steps echoing across the polished floor. He crouched beside the filtration unit and examined the copper tubing closely. Who designed this pressure stabilization system? He asked without looking up. Noah swallowed. I did. And the ultraviolet sequencing? Also me. The judge slowly stood again. His expression had changed completely now. The skepticism was gone. In its place sat something far more dangerous. Respect. Ethan noticed it immediately. So did Principal Whitmore. The room felt different now, colder somehow, as if the balance inside the auditorium had shifted without anyone agreeing to it. Rain hammered harder against the tall windows overlooking the football field. Gray light spilled across the marble floor in long shadows. The judge turned toward the other panel members. This student needs to submit his work to the National Young Innovators Committee immediately. Murmurs spread through the crowd. Ethan's face hardened instantly. Wait a second, he interrupted sharply. That competition is invitation only. The judge nodded calmly. Correct. Ethan spread his arms toward Noah's machine. Then how exactly does somebody like him qualify? Somebody like him. Again. Noah felt the words hit harder this time because the entire room heard what Ethan truly meant now. Not poor. Not scholarship student. Something deeper. Older. The kind of sentence people wrapped in polite language so they could pretend it was not prejudice. Daniel lowered his eyes near the exit. Noah hated that too. Hated how men like his father spent entire lifetimes swallowing disrespect because surviving mattered more than pride. Principal Whitmore quickly forced another smile. Ethan raises a fair point. Brighton Academy has a formal recommendation process. The elderly judge turned slowly toward Whitmore. And how many students from maintenance families have received recommendations here? Whitmore blinked once. No answer came. The silence itself became an answer. Noah could feel hundreds of eyes moving between the stage, the judges, and his father standing quietly beside a yellow mop bucket near the doorway. Suddenly the auditorium lights flickered once overhead. A low buzz rolled through the sound system before stabilizing again. Outside, lightning flashed beyond the rain-streaked windows. Noah glanced instinctively toward the filtration device. The blue light near the center panel had dimmed slightly. His stomach tightened. The battery supply was draining faster than expected. He crouched beside the machine quickly and adjusted the wiring near the side compartment. Ethan folded his arms with renewed confidence. There it is, he said loudly. Knew it was too good to last. A few students laughed nervously again, grateful for permission to return to familiar territory. Noah ignored them. His fingers moved carefully across the wiring connections while sweat gathered near his temples beneath the hot stage lights. The machine hummed unevenly now. Daniel took one unconscious step forward from the doorway before stopping himself. Noah knew that look immediately. His father always moved closer whenever something was about to fall apart, even when there was nothing he could do to stop it. Then suddenly the filtration unit powered down completely. The blue light vanished. The auditorium erupted into whispers again. Ethan smiled slowly. Guess the janitor special finally broke. Noah stared at the dark machine for one long second. Then quietly, without panic, he reached into his backpack and pulled out a small cracked solar battery no larger than a paperback novel. The room fell silent again. The cracked solar battery looked pathetic in Noah's hands. Its corners were chipped, one side held together with faded black tape, and the scratched surface carried years of wear beneath the harsh auditorium lights. A few students immediately laughed again, relieved to see something that fit the version of Noah they preferred believing in. Ethan smiled wider. Seriously, he said loudly. That thing belongs in a junkyard. Noah ignored him. He crouched beside the filtration unit and carefully connected the battery to the exposed wiring near the lower panel. The auditorium stayed strangely quiet after that. Even the laughter faded faster now. Everyone was watching too closely. Noah's fingers moved with calm precision despite the pressure pressing against his chest. He could hear rain hammering the windows overhead. Could hear phones recording every second. Could feel Ethan waiting for him to fail. The old battery clicked once against the connector port. Nothing happened. Ethan let out a soft laugh through his nose. There it is. Principal Whitmore adjusted his tie awkwardly and stepped toward the microphone again. Perhaps this is a good moment to conclude today's demonstration. Noah did not look up. Give it 5 seconds. His voice stayed steady. The room held still. 1 second. 2. 3. Then suddenly the machine hummed back to life. The blue light flickered weakly at first before glowing brighter than before. Gasps spread across the auditorium. Clear water began pouring steadily through the output tube again, faster now, cleaner now, almost glowing beneath the stage lights. One of the judges stepped forward immediately and dipped a portable testing strip into the cylinder. Everyone watched the tiny color indicators shift across the paper. The judge looked up slowly, stunned. 99.7% purified. Complete silence followed. Ethan's expression finally cracked. Just for a second. But Noah saw it. That tiny flicker of disbelief people showed when reality refused to stay inside the box they built for it. The elderly judge turned toward the panel table sharply. This is extraordinary. Another judge nodded immediately. Especially at his age. Noah slowly stood beside the machine. Sweat dampened the collar of his shirt beneath the hot lights, but his eyes stayed calm. Years of being underestimated had taught him something valuable. The moment people finally listened usually came right after they exhausted themselves trying not to. Principal Whitmore forced another smile, though it looked painful now. Brighton Academy is certainly proud to support all forms of student innovation. Noah almost looked away at that. Almost. But something stopped him. Maybe it was the memory of teachers ignoring him in class discussions. Maybe it was hearing parents whisper about backgrounds like his during scholarship dinners. Or maybe it was seeing his father silently clean around students who never learned his name. Noah looked directly at the crowd instead. I built this because contaminated water kills thousands of people every year in poor communities. The room stayed silent. Places without expensive infrastructure, he continued quietly. Places people ignore because helping them is not profitable. Several students shifted uncomfortably again. Ethan folded his arms tightly across his chest. Noah kept going. This entire prototype cost less than $100 to build. That landed harder than anything else he had said all day. Less than $100. Some students in the front row wore sneakers worth 3 times that amount. One of the judges slowly removed his glasses. "Young man," he said carefully, "have you submitted this work anywhere outside the school?" Noah hesitated. Then he shook his head once. "No, sir." "Why not?" Noah glanced toward the side exit where Daniel still stood beside the mop bucket under flickering hallway lights. His father looked exhausted. Older than usual somehow. Like years of invisible labor had suddenly become visible all at once beneath everyone's attention. Noah swallowed hard before answering. "Because people usually stop listening after they find out who my father is." Nobody laughed this time. Not even Ethan. The silence turned heavy enough to feel physical. Outside, lightning flashed bright white across the rain-soaked football field. The auditorium lights dimmed briefly again. Then from somewhere near the back row, a slow clap echoed through the room. Everyone turned. Daniel Brooks immediately lowered his hands the moment he realized all eyes were suddenly on him. But it was too late. The entire auditorium had already seen the pride shining across his tired face. The applause started awkwardly. Uneven. A few scattered claps echoing through the massive auditorium while everyone waited to see whether they were allowed to join in. Daniel immediately stopped clapping altogether, embarrassed by the attention suddenly aimed at him. He lowered his hands slowly beside the mop bucket and took half a step backward toward the hallway shadows. But something had already shifted inside the room. One by one, more students began clapping too. Quietly at first. Then louder. Noah stood frozen beside the humming filtration device, almost unable to process the sound. For years Brighton Academy had only noticed him when something needed to be mocked, corrected, or ignored. Now hundreds of eyes stared at him differently. Not with pity. Not with amusement. With uncertainty. And uncertainty was dangerous because it meant people were being forced to reconsider things they had always accepted without question. Ethan remained seated while the applause spread around him. His jaw tightened slightly as he glanced toward the judges' table where two panel members were already reviewing Noah's research packet again with intense focus. Principal Whitmore forced himself to clap as well, though his expression looked strained beneath the stage lighting. Noah barely noticed any of it. His eyes stayed locked on his father near the side exit. Daniel looked uncomfortable standing there in his faded maintenance uniform while wealthy parents and honor students stared openly at him for perhaps the first time in years. The fluorescent hallway light above him flickered softly against the silver strands in his beard. His work gloves still hung halfway from his back pocket. Water spots from cleaning solutions stained the front of his navy shirt. He looked exactly the same as he had looked every night coming home exhausted after work. But somehow the room saw him differently now too. That almost hurt Noah more than the insults ever had. The applause slowly faded into murmurs again as the judges gathered near the front table. Rain continued sliding down the tall auditorium windows in silver streaks while distant thunder rolled across the football field outside. Noah powered down the filtration device carefully and closed the cracked black case around it with slow deliberate movements. The metal latches clicked softly in the silence. "Noah." The voice came from the elderly judge. Noah looked up immediately. The man approached the stage holding the research packet against his chest. "I would like you to submit this project to the National Young Innovators Competition." Several students gasped quietly. Even Ethan straightened in his chair. Noah blinked once, unsure he had heard correctly. "Sir?" The judge smiled faintly. "The final round takes place in Chicago next month. Top universities and research sponsors attend every year." Noah's throat tightened. Chicago. He had never been farther than 2 counties outside Brighton. Plane tickets alone cost more money than he and Daniel usually spent in months. Principal Whitmore cleared his throat quickly. "That competition requires extensive preparation and travel arrangements." The judge looked toward him calmly. Then perhaps Brighton Academy should support one of the brightest students it has ever produced. The sentence landed like a stone dropped into still water. Noah saw several teachers exchange uncomfortable glances. Ethan stared down at the floor now, tapping one polished shoe against the marble tile with visible irritation. Daniel shifted uneasily near the exit. Noah knew exactly what his father was thinking. Money. Rent. Bills. Overtime shifts. Reality always arrived eventually, no matter how beautiful a moment felt at first. Noah carefully lifted the black case from the table. The handle felt warm against his palm from the stage lights. Around him, students slowly began filing out of the auditorium while whispering to one another. Some glanced back at Noah curiously. Others avoided eye contact completely. Ethan finally stood from his seat and adjusted the cuffs of his blazer. For a brief second, his eyes met Noah's across the room. No smirk this time. No jokes. Just something colder. Threatened pride. Then Ethan turned and walked away without another word. Noah watched him disappear into the crowd before looking back toward Daniel. His father gave him a tired smile so small most people would have missed it entirely. But Noah saw everything in it. Pride. Fear. Exhaustion. Hope. The dangerous kind of hope poor people learned not to trust too easily. Daniel slowly picked up the mop bucket again and pushed it toward the hallway. The wheels squeaked softly against the marble floor. Noah hurried off the stage to help him, but before he reached the exit, he heard one of the judges say quietly behind him, "That boy just changed his future tonight." Noah wanted to believe it. He truly did. But as he stepped into the cold fluorescent hallway beside his father and smelled the familiar mix of bleach, floor wax, and rain drifting through the open service doors, he knew something else too. People did not give up their prejudices simply because they witnessed brilliance. 3 weeks later, snow drifted slowly across downtown Chicago like ash falling through silver light. Noah stood near the enormous glass windows of the Palmer Convention Center with his hands buried deep inside the pockets of his borrowed coat. Beyond the street below, yellow taxis crawled through slush while steam rose from subway grates into the freezing evening air. Everything about the city felt larger than life. Taller buildings. Louder traffic. Faster people. Even the air smelled different here, sharp with cold steel and coffee drifting from crowded sidewalks. Behind him, hundreds of voices filled the massive convention hall where the National Young Innovators Competition had gathered finalists from across the country. Expensive display booths lined the ballroom beneath crystal chandeliers. Students from elite prep schools adjusted polished presentations while university recruiters moved through the crowd carrying leather portfolios and silver name badges. Noah looked down at his own identification card hanging from a wrinkled blue lanyard. Noah Brooks, finalist. The words still felt unreal. Daniel stood nearby beside their small presentation table, nervously straightening brochures for the third time in 10 minutes. He had never owned a suit before this trip. Noah could still see the deep crease lines from where they had removed it from the discount store packaging 2 days ago. The sleeves fit slightly too short around his wrists, but Daniel wore it carefully anyway, as though afraid breathing too hard might damage it. Every few minutes he quietly wiped invisible dust from the display table using a folded handkerchief from his pocket. Old habits. Noah noticed everything. Across the ballroom, television cameras moved between finalists while reporters interviewed students beside inventions that looked sleek enough to belong inside billion-dollar laboratories. Noah's filtration device sat humbly beneath bright white lights, its scratched casing and patched solar battery standing out sharply against the polished perfection surrounding it. A pair of MIT recruiters had already visited earlier that morning. So had a representative from Stanford. Noah still could not fully process those conversations. Neither could Daniel. Every time another university official approached the booth, Daniel stepped slightly farther back as though convinced somebody would eventually realize they had invited the wrong people into the room. "You nervous?" Daniel asked quietly. Noah exhaled fog against the cold glass window beside him. "Yeah." Daniel nodded once. "Good." Noah glanced sideways. His father smiled faintly. "Means it matters." Before Noah could answer, movement near the ballroom entrance drew attention across the room. Ethan Calloway walked inside wearing a tailored charcoal coat beside his father, Richard Calloway, whose technology company sponsored several national education initiatives. Cameras immediately shifted toward them. Reporters smiled. Organizers hurried over to shake hands. Ethan looked completely at home here. Like the entire building had been designed for people exactly like him. Then his eyes landed on Noah across the ballroom. The briefest pause. Ethan's expression tightened almost invisibly before he continued walking. Daniel noticed too. His shoulders stiffened slightly beside the presentation table. "Ignore him," Noah said quietly. Daniel nodded, though worry still lingered across his face. The competition announcer's voice suddenly echoed through the ballroom speakers. "Final judging will begin in 15 minutes. The room immediately stirred with nervous energy. Students adjusted prototypes. Judges gathered tablets and scoring packets. Snow continued sliding down the giant convention center windows while the city darkened outside into a blur of white headlights and winter shadows. Noah carefully checked the filtration unit one final time. The blue power light glowed steadily beneath the scratched panel. Good. Stable. Reliable. Everything he had built with his father's help now sat under the attention of some of the most powerful scientific institutions in America. Then quietly, almost casually, Ethan appeared beside the booth. "Nice setup," he said. Noah looked up slowly. Ethan's smile never reached his eyes. "Would be a shame if something happened before final judging." Daniel straightened immediately beside the table. The ballroom noise suddenly felt distant beneath the coldness in Ethan's voice. Noah held his stare calmly. "You still think I do not belong here?" Ethan glanced around the glittering ballroom before answering softly, "Look around, Noah. Deep down, you know it too." Then he walked away toward the center stage lights while snow continued falling beyond the glass like the city itself was holding its breath. The ballroom lights dimmed slightly as final judging began. Hundreds of conversations softened into nervous murmurs while judges moved from booth to booth carrying digital scoring tablets and thick evaluation folders. Snow swirled heavily outside the towering glass windows now, blanketing the Chicago streets in white silence. Inside the convention center, everything felt sharp and electric. Noah stood beside the filtration unit with his hands clasped tightly behind his back while Daniel remained near the edge of the booth, trying not to look overwhelmed by the cameras and reporters moving through the aisles. Every few minutes someone stopped to photograph the machine. Others whispered while reading Noah's project summary displayed beside the scratched blue casing. Low-cost sustainable purification system for underserved communities. The words looked strangely small beneath all the attention they were suddenly receiving. Across the ballroom, Ethan presented his own project beneath a glowing corporate sponsor banner carrying his father's company logo. His prototype looked flawless. Polished silver materials. Professional branding. Large digital displays rotating animated graphics behind him. Everything about it screamed money. But Noah noticed something else too. The judges nodded politely during Ethan's presentation, yet none of them stayed very long. Meanwhile, more and more officials kept returning to Noah's booth asking detailed questions, requesting technical breakdowns, studying the patched solar battery with growing fascination. Daniel stood silently listening to every conversation as though afraid the moment might disappear if he spoke too loudly. Then the final round began. One by one, the remaining finalists were invited onto the central stage beneath the massive convention screen. Noah waited near the back curtain while stage lights painted the floor in soft blue reflections. His heartbeat pounded so loudly he could barely hear the announcer introducing the next competitor. Daniel adjusted Noah's tie carefully with trembling hands. "No matter what happens," he said quietly, "you already proved them wrong." Noah nodded once, though nerves still twisted hard in his chest. Beyond the curtains, applause echoed through the ballroom as Ethan finished his presentation to strong reactions from the audience. Ethan walked off stage confidently, barely glancing at Noah while passing him backstage. "Good luck," he said calmly. But the smile beneath the words carried something colder. Noah stepped onto the stage moments later beneath a flood of white light. The ballroom stretched endlessly before him. Hundreds of faces. Judges. Investors. University recruiters. Cameras. For one terrifying second, he forgot how to breathe. Then his eyes found Daniel standing near the side curtains in that slightly too small suit with tired hands folded tightly in front of him. And suddenly Noah remembered every late night in their apartment. Every broken circuit board. Every overtime shift. Every moment his father chose sacrifice over rest. Noah exhaled slowly and began speaking. He explained how contaminated water disproportionately affected low-income communities across America. He described designing the filtration system using recycled materials so poorer towns could actually afford implementation. He demonstrated the solar backup battery powering the machine independently during outages and environmental disasters. The ballroom stayed completely silent while he spoke. Not polite silence. Focused silence. The kind people gave only when they realized they were witnessing something real. When Noah finished, one of the senior judges leaned toward the microphone. "Mr. Brooks," she said carefully, "what inspired you to dedicate this project specifically to underserved communities?" Noah hesitated only briefly. Then he answered honestly. "Because those are usually the communities people stop caring about first." The room went still. Daniel lowered his eyes near the curtain, emotion tightening across his tired face. Even several judges looked visibly affected by the answer. Then the ballroom speakers crackled softly overhead. "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer said, "the judges have reached their final decision." Every finalist stepped onto the stage beneath the enormous projection screen while cameras repositioned across the ballroom floor. Snow continued falling outside the glass walls like drifting ash beneath the city lights. Noah stood near the far end of the line beside students wearing designer suits and polished smiles. Ethan stood only a few feet away staring forward with perfect posture. The announcer opened a gold envelope slowly. The entire ballroom held its breath. The recipient of this year's National Young Innovators Grand Prize, a pause. Noah felt his pulse hammering inside his ears. Noah Brooks. The ballroom exploded into applause so suddenly Noah almost flinched. Giant screens behind the stage illuminated with his name in brilliant white letters while cameras immediately swung toward him. Daniel froze completely near the curtain. One hand covered his mouth as tears filled his eyes before he could hide them. Ethan remained perfectly still beside the stage lights, staring at the screen like reality itself had betrayed him. For a few seconds, Noah could not move. The applause crashing through the ballroom sounded distant somehow, muffled beneath the shock flooding his chest. His name stretched across the giant convention screens in glowing white letters while cameras flashed from every direction like bursts of lightning. University scholarship offers. National Innovation winner. Environmental Impact Award. The words rotated beside his image faster than he could process them. Noah looked instinctively toward the side curtain again. Daniel still stood there frozen beneath the dim backstage lights, one trembling hand pressed against his mouth. Tears shined openly across his tired face now. He did not even try hiding them anymore. For years Daniel Brooks had spent his life making himself invisible inside hallways, classrooms, cafeterias, and office buildings so other people could feel important walking past him. But tonight the entire ballroom saw him. Truly saw him. Noah stepped forward slowly as the announcer handed him the Crystal Award trophy. It felt heavier than expected in his hands. Cold glass. Sharp edges. Real. The ballroom rose into a standing ovation while judges applauded beside television cameras and flashing lights. Even some finalists clapped sincerely now. Noah glanced briefly toward Ethan. The confidence that usually surrounded him like armor was gone. Ethan stood perfectly still near the stage lights, staring down at the polished floor while applause thundered around him. Richard Calloway leaned close beside his son, whispering something Noah could not hear, but Ethan barely reacted. For once in his life, there was no clever response waiting behind his expression. No smirk. No superiority. Just silence. The dangerous kind of silence that comes when a person realizes the world did not bend the way they expected it to. After the ceremony ended, reporters crowded around Noah asking questions about universities, patents, sponsorship deals, and future research plans. Microphones hovered inches from his face while cameras followed every movement through the ballroom. Noah answered carefully, still overwhelmed by how quickly everything had changed. Through it all, Daniel remained quietly near the back wall holding Noah's old black prototype case against his chest like something sacred. Several times people approached him to shake his hand. Daniel always looked startled afterward, as though he still expected someone to laugh at him for standing in the wrong place. Eventually the crowd thinned enough for Noah to finally reach him. For a moment neither of them spoke. Snow drifted softly outside the towering windows while workers began clearing tables across the ballroom. Daniel looked down at the crystal trophy in Noah's hands and smiled through exhausted eyes. "Your mother would have loved this," he whispered. Noah swallowed hard. They stood there quietly together beneath fading ballroom lights while distant traffic glowed beyond the snowy Chicago streets. Then movement approached from behind. Noah turned slowly. Ethan stood a few feet away with his hands buried inside his coat pockets. His posture looked smaller somehow without the crowd surrounding him. For several uncomfortable seconds, nobody spoke. Finally Ethan exhaled quietly. "I was wrong about you." Noah said nothing. Ethan glanced toward Daniel briefly before lowering his eyes again. "About both of you." The words sounded difficult coming out of him. "Honest." Daniel adjusted the old black prototype case against his chest but remained silent. Ethan looked at Noah carefully. "You built something that actually matters." Noah studied him for a moment before answering softly, "My father taught me that people who clean the world deserve clean water too." Ethan's expression faltered slightly. Then slowly, almost awkwardly, he nodded once. No excuses. No arguments. Just acceptance. A few minutes later, the convention center began shutting down for the night. Reporters disappeared. Lights dimmed section by section across the massive ballroom. Snow continued falling heavily outside as Noah and Daniel finally stepped toward the exit together. Daniel still carried the worn black prototype case while Noah held the Crystal Award tucked carefully beneath one arm. Near the glass doors, a maintenance worker pushed a mop bucket slowly across the marble lobby floor beneath soft yellow lighting. The wheels squeaked quietly through the empty hall. Daniel paused for only a second watching him. Noah noticed the look in his father's eyes immediately. Recognition. Respect. Understanding. Then Daniel smiled faintly and kept walking beside his son into the cold Chicago night while snowflakes drifted silently across the city around them.